Thanks, everybody. Wow, what an amazing round of applause there for me, and I haven't even spoken yet. So it's with great pleasure that I'd like to welcome everybody to 2021 Virtual Heart Week. I'm Corey Wegner, Director of the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative, or better known as SCRI, an outreach program dedicated to the protection of cultural heritage in crisis situations. SCRI's work includes monitoring a response for domestic and international heritage impacted by disasters, and then applying that knowledge gained from field experience into our research and training. One of the most important goals of SCRI is to raise awareness about the need to better integrate cultural heritage into the larger disaster risk reduction frameworks, both domestically and internationally. One of the ways we do this is through providing training and access to expert networks. We know that the most successful disaster responses for cultural heritage collections are prepared for and led by the local stakeholders who take care of it every day. But to do so, our colleagues need access to training and tools to work with. Our domestic training program is called Heritage Emergency and Response Training, or HEART, a program developed through the partnership of the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative and the Heritage Emergency National Task Force. The main goal of our HEART program is to recruit our participants not just from across the cultural heritage field, but also from colleagues like emergency managers, first responders, and military personnel, and providing that way a unique learning environment. Participants of the course then join a network of professionals across the country who share information and work together to address emergencies impacting heritage. Normally, we host HEART in person every year at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. But due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we've decided to remain virtual this year. Virtual we may be, but we still have an exciting program planned for you. The SCRI HENTEF team have lined up a week of informative online programming dedicated to increasing understanding of emergencies and disasters that impact cultural institutions and historic sites. Though we're unfortunately unable to train in person this year, we're glad to continue fulfilling the mission of HEART through this online program, providing an opportunity for those in the research, cultural heritage, and emergency management fields to better understand each other and the intersections within their areas of expertise. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors. On behalf of the Smithsonian and the entire HEART program team, I'd like to thank the Bank of America, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and the National Endowment for the Humanities for their ongoing support to the HEART program. Now, for more about HEART and our virtual program this week, I'd like to introduce my colleague, HENTEF coordinator and co-chair, Lori Foley. Lori?
Thank you, Corey. I too would like to welcome you as we launch Virtual Heart Week today, brought to you by the Heritage Emergency National Task Force, or HENTEF. I'm Lori Foley of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and I coordinate the activities of HENTEF with lots and lots and lots of support. HENTEF's mission is to protect cultural heritage in our nation's states, tribes, territories, and local communities from the damaging effects of natural disasters and other emergencies. FEMA's Office of Environmental Planning and Historic Preservation and the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative, as Corey mentioned, co-sponsor HENTEF. Together, we advocate for the protection of cultural heritage and the arts. The 62 federal agencies and national service organizations that comprise the task force represent expertise in the arts, culture, historic preservation, emergency management, and tribal affairs. Our resources span the entire emergency management continuum before, during, and after disasters. Following a major disaster, HENTEF works with federal agencies, with state arts and cultural agencies, with state emergency management agencies, and private nonprofit arts and cultural organizations to ascertain the extent and severity of the damage. We work with the Department of the Interior to deliver technical assistance to these very organizations. Following a major disaster, we also provide guidance to disaster survivors to help them save their cherished family belongings. On blue sky days, when we're not attending to disasters, we encourage the incorporation of the arts and cultural and historic resources into disaster planning and mitigation efforts at all levels of government. And we educate and train cultural stewards and emergency managers, primarily through the program we call HEART, Heritage Emergency and Response Training. HENTEF's mission is based on connecting the cultural community with the emergency management community. Each community has a separate vocabulary and different priorities following a disaster. These two disparate communities need to understand each other and work together to protect our cultural heritage. In 2017, with funding from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and Bank of America, HENTEF launched HEART for U.S. professionals to gain skills and hands-on experience in protecting, evacuating, and salvaging collections. Most importantly, cultural stewards and emergency managers learn how to work with each other to protect local theater, museums, historical societies, and countless other organizations. These entities hold the collective history of communities. They empower us to reflect on the present and dream of a better future. If these organizations don't recover, a community never fully recovers. HEART improves disaster response at the institutional level and strengthens existing networks. It connects participants to the wider international first aider network of people trained to document and protect cultural heritage in times of crisis. Since HEART's inception in 2017, we've conducted 7 unique HEART programs. The week-long course launched in Washington, D.C., and it's been taught at the Smithsonian every year until last year due to the pandemic. Following Hurricanes Maria and Irma, HEART traveled to Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands to help cultural stewards in the territories become better prepared for future hurricanes. In 2019, a pilot version of HEART was hosted by the State Museum of Maine in partnership with the Maine Emergency Management Agency. We're currently developing a pilot HEART program to train tribal cultural stewards and emergency managers. Thus far, 172 professionals have graduated from HEART. The 19 emergency managers come from federal, state, local, and tribal agencies. The 153 cultural stewards hold positions in collections management or are archivists, librarians, conservators, or curators. A small percentage work in historic preservation or territorial government. They come from 28 states as far west as Hawaii, and if you just count continental US, as far east as Maine, as far north as Alaska, and as far south as Florida. Graduates also hail from Puerto Rico, the US Virgin Islands, and the District of Columbia. Earlier this year, HEART conducted a survey of its alumni. 82 responded, most of whom were cultural stewards. Those taking the survey were evenly distributed along early, mid, and late career paths. Based on the responses, 70% of HEART graduates have applied what they learned in HEART to teach others how to respond to an event involving cultural heritage. 90% found their HEART training very useful or extremely useful in assessing and managing risks to cultural heritage and in improving existing disaster plans at their organization or other organizations such as agencies or on behalf of these organizations or agencies. Most continue their training through webinars and check-in meetings facilitated by HENTEF and take advantage of the HEART graduate Facebook group. Thus, HEART has created and fosters a community whose members continue to learn from HENTEF and from each other. One of the HEART graduates noted, "I highly recommend this training. The mixture of hands-on activities, field trips, and classroom learning perfectly complemented each other and allowed for all learning styles. I still frequently refer to my notes and lessons from the training." Although we're unable to host an in-person Heart this year, we're delighted to bring you a week of informative programming. Our focus, increasing your understanding of emergencies and disasters that affect cultural institutions and historic sites. Here's this week's exciting lineup. Tomorrow, Dr. Samantha Montano of the Massachusetts Maritime Academy will explain how volunteers can be utilized to benefit your institution and your community in times of disaster. On Wednesday, Marta Mabel Perez of the Museum of Art of Puerto Rico will describe the institution's experiences during the devastating 2017 hurricane season and its emergence as a leader in Puerto Rico's arts and culture community during recovery. On Thursday, join us as Sarah Sutton of Environment and Culture Partners discusses the intersection of cultural heritage and climate change, recommending actions that can be integrated into everyday work and lessons to learn from other institutions already developing disaster plans. To wrap up the week, Dr. Paki Kumar of University College London will discuss how cultural institutions can harness the power of social media during disasters to create awareness and facilitate a coordinated response. But now it's time for me to wrap up and turn the program over to SCRI's Stacy Bowe, SCRI's Training Program Manager. Over to you, Stacy.
Hello, everyone. As Lori said, I'm Stacy Bowe, and I'm the Training Program Manager at the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative. I have been involved with the HEART program since it came into being in 2017. It has been extremely rewarding to build this program over the past couple of years, and it is always a thrill to learn from our HEART graduates and what they have gone off to do since their training. We are about to watch 3 pre-recorded presentations from 3 of our HEART graduates. The videos total will take about 24 minutes, and then I will moderate a live Q&A. First, we will have Jared Yaks, Collections Curator and Offsite Facilities Manager at the Tri-Cities Historical Museum in Michigan. The second is Angeli Grantham, Curator of Statewide Services at the Alaska State Museum. And finally, Pepper Youngs, who is Curator and Park Supervisor of Indian Grinding Rock State Historic Park within California State Parks. Now, as you watch the videos, feel free to submit a question through the Q&A button in Zoom, and we will answer them afterwards during the live Q&A panel. Unfortunately, one of our video presenters, Angeli, is unable to join us live today, but we will share her contact information, and she is happy to speak with anyone who would like to know more about what she presents in her video today. Now, what I hope you all will take away from these presentations is not only to learn about what others in the field are doing or have done, but that training around this topic of disaster planning and response, it works. Though the HEART program focuses on imparting specific technical knowledge, what has really shown through to me and what I think is one of the program's greatest strengths is that it allows cultural and emergency professionals time, space, and the opportunity to learn with each other. Being given that chance to brainstorm, discuss, and practice these skills in a safe environment increases the likelihood that these skills will stick. We are so proud of not only these 3 graduates of the program, but the many others who have been able to go back to their organizations and make positive progress. We must all chip away at this gigantic challenge of increasing and diffusing disaster planning and preparedness throughout the entire cultural heritage field. I am happy to now share with you these 3 stories.
Hi there, my name is Jared Yaks. I'm the Curator of Collections for the Tri-Cities Historical Museum, and I'm the Lieutenant of Station 3 for the Walker Fire Department. In May of 2020, the Edenville Dam and the Sanford Dam near Midland, Michigan, had a catastrophic failure after a massive torrent of rain. This affected 2 museums in the area, the Midland Historical Society and the Sanford Museum. The museums were submerged under about 18 to 30 inches of water on the main levels. And then so those that had like sub basements or sub levels were just completely submerged. So these institutions were underwater for a period of several days. When they were able to go back in, they put a call out to the Michigan Museums Association asking for some type of help. I was able to go over there and deploy within about 3 hours. I was there and able to apply then my HART training to help with the rescue efforts for those museums. After arriving at the Midland Historical Society, we were able to put together the incident command system and actually establish a clear chain of command to help organize the people and resources that we need in order to rescue those artifacts. Over the course of about 4.5 days, we had about 400 volunteers come through. There was about 100 museum professionals and about 300 people that were within the community that came to help rescue the artifacts within the museum. It's a lot of people to try and manage. And the training that we did in HART through the incident command system really kind of helped organize that. Without that system, it would have been just complete chaos because nobody would have known who to go to or who to talk to, where to get the resources that we needed. So really, the incident command system gave structure to that, which made the whole operation very, very efficient and effective. Each day, we were able to then come up with an incident action plan that we had talked about again within the HART program that helped us kind of plan out what are our objectives for the day. Looking at tens of thousands of objects that we had to try and rescue and deal with, thousands of them that were affected by the water, others that just had to be evacuated off to a stable, secure site in another location. So these plans kind of gave us manageable chunks and then clear objectives for each of the teams that were going in, so that way they knew exactly what they had to do and then determine what resources did they need in order to go out and grab that type of stuff. So the salvage efforts were it was amazing to kind of see that in action. Again, thousands of objects that were underwater. So then using those techniques of stabilizing, trying to get the objects that were under the water and safely transfer them into a freezer so that way they could then be later dealt with, so that way they weren't affected by mold and mildew, packaging them up in a way where it's not going to damage them any further. It was all just incredibly valuable. And I was able to just go through and coach these teams then and make sure that they knew this is exactly how you need to do the operation in order to take care of the object. One thing that kind of hurt us was that there were no disaster kits at the sites. So that really kind of slowed down our operations. And in the HART program, that was something that we really kind of stressed, was that it's important to have a good disaster kit to help you at the onset of the event. If we had those disaster kits, we really could have kind of jumped in and made life a lot easier for us. But we had to go out and try and find the supplies that we needed to really begin the operations. So finally, at the end of the incident, we talked about our continuance of operations plans. So what can the museum do to continue to be helpful and relevant within their communities? What elements could the museum still provide for historical research, for display purposes, while their main facility was undergoing their restoration efforts? So with the continuance of operations plan, it was just kind of brainstorming and figuring out all these different things that help keep the museum functional, even while they're trying to recover from these disasters. So the HART program was it was very helpful, and the training was just amazing to be able to see that all these artifacts, all these objects are being affected. What can we do to protect them, and what plan do we need to come up with in order to rescue them? And then just go step by step through the training of this is what we need to do, this is how we need to do it, and this is how we can be effective. So we were kind of using it as a case study here in Michigan because we had a very similar incident happen years ago up north, where a museum of similar size was affected by a very similar operations. In Midland, for each site, it took us a little over 4.5 days to complete each operation. So the HART program is just it's that effective, where we were able to complete those operations and stabilize and save a vast majority of each of those museums' collections in a very short amount of time. So the HEART program is incredibly important and just incredibly effective. I can't stress how awesome it was to be able to go through that training and then be able to apply it in a real life situation. So thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angeli Grantham. I'm curator of statewide services at the Alaska State Museum in Juneau, Alaska. And my job is to help with the development of museums across Alaska. I'm also a graduate of the 2019 HEART program. And the HEART program is the Heritage Emergency and Response Training Program. That happened about a year after a major earthquake was in Anchorage. We had a 7.1 earthquake that damaged around 13 or more cultural organizations. And we realized in Alaska that we needed to do a lot more to enhance our preparedness and our response activities. So HEART was a great launch pad for this program that we developed in Alaska. We received a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities for the Preparing Alaska's Cultural Organizations for Emergencies program. We call it PACO. And to date, we've had over 30 Alaska cultural organizations take part in the PACO training program. We're currently within the second of what will ultimately be 3 cohorts of participants in PACO. And the program has 3 main components. The first component is an 8-module online course. It features both synchronous and asynchronous aspects. And the course is directed towards helping participants create their own emergency preparedness and disaster response plans. We meet weekly for check-ins, for office hours, and for class discussions. And then people individually watch other webinars and develop the different aspects of their emergency plans. Each of the participating institutions is also paired with a coach. So these coaches are people that have expertise in preparedness and response, in conservation, and all sorts of topics that apply to caring for collections and for responding to disasters. And these coaches provide additional assistance to all the participants. So we meet as needed, typically at least on a monthly basis with our participants to talk about their progress in planning and to provide that additional support because, we all need it when we're doing things as big as emergency planning. So the coaching aspect has been a really nice feature of the program. And the last feature of the program is starting in this spring, we're finally going to be able to get together for the workshop component. So we will be hosting 3 different workshops 3 times, and each of the workshops will feature a live burn activity. So we'll be going to the hub cities of Alaska to do this and working at regional fire training centers. And we're going to be setting up a mock collection storage unit at one of the fire training centers. And the fire team is actually going to start it on fire. They're going to fight the fire, and then the participants are going to put what they've learned into action. So they'll be using ICS, they'll be conducting damage assessments, and they'll be coordinating the salvage and evacuation of the damaged collection. There's been so many tie-ins to the PACO program from the Heritage Emergency and Response Training that I was able to do in DC several years ago. I've used a lot of the resources that were available in the course. I've tapped a lot of the organizers and the speakers and also other HEART participants to help me with the PACO program. And the HEART training also really gave me the practical experience that I needed to be a reputable instructor. So I'm really grateful for the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative for doing that program and bringing me along. I believe that there's aspects of the PACO training program that could be applied all over the place. And I would be happy to talk with anyone about this program and to share what we've learned and to help in any way I can if you're thinking about starting your own training programs where you live. So please reach out at any time. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pepper Youngs. I'm with California State Parks. I'm a curator. I'm presenting on behalf of myself and Claire Phillips, who's an archivist with California State Parks. She graduated the HARP program in 2019 and I did in 2018. This is going to be an extremely quick overview of some of the evacuations from our fire seasons in 2020 and 2021. With a specific focus on Indian Grinding Rock State Historic Park. That evac happened this year, and we get to focus on that one because I happen to be the collection manager and I ran that evac from start to finish. So I'll have some notes about how that went. The HARP program was such a huge impact on the success of that operation, and just some important lessons learned. So just a really quick summary of all of the wildfire evacuations from state parks in the last 2 years. We had 2 very active fire years in 2020 and 2021. This is totaling tens of thousands of museum collection objects. We're really lucky with state parks that we have a curatorial emergency response team, and that's a list of trained curatorial staff who know how to pack quickly and respond to wildfire events. It is comprised of archivists like Claire, collection managers, historians, curators, curatorial aides, things like that. So when we get a call for a wildfire that a park is threatened that has a collection, we then get dispatched as a team to then do the evac. And then those collections get returned to the statewide collections facility in Sacramento, where they're frozen and then stored until they can be safely returned. Today, I'm going to specifically be talking about the Caldor fire. That fire had the largest impact on state parks this year. It was the second largest fire this year in the state. Dixie Fire was first. The Caldor fire started on August 14th, and I've highlighted just a few different time points showing how quickly that fire grew over the first few days and why we responded as we did. So for Indian Grinding Rock, that was the first park that was evacuated based on the Caldor fire. Indian Grinding Rock, you can't see it, but it's around down here on this map. It started on August 14th in Grizzly Flats, and the fire then grew with tremendous force over the next few days, with southwest winds moving the fire towards the northeast. I've highlighted these 2 points showing that between the night of the 17th and the morning of the 18th, the fire grew almost 50,000 acres overnight, which was just unprecedented growth. And that was partly because of southwest winds, but also because this entire region where the Caldor fire hit has extremely dense forest. It is extremely dry to drought conditions, and it hasn't burned in over 100 years. So it really was a worst case scenario. The morning of the 18th, we received word that the winds were going to be changing from southwest winds, meaning they're blowing towards the northeast, to northeast winds, meaning they were going to be blowing towards the southwest, directly towards the park. So given how quickly that fire exploded overnight, we obviously were extremely nervous knowing that we were within, at this point, I think we were within about 15 miles of it. So the Caldor fire eventually burned for 67 days over 220,000 acres and would result in the evacuation of 3 state parks. And we'll talk about Indian Grinding Rock. So this is the view of the plume from Indian Grinding Rock. This is the morning of the 17th, the day before the evacuation. This is the rock in front of us. We're looking north towards the fire. And over here on the side is the museum that we evacuated. So you can see the park is a oak meadow in the middle of a really dense pine forest. So we are a huge wildfire risk. And I was obviously very nervous as the collection manager and park supervisor for this location about this wind shift we were about to experience. I was also in the really weird position of the collection manager, where obviously with the HARP program training I've had and the emergency response experience, I was ready to start packing, but I wasn't allowed to start packing until I got permission from my district leadership, which they didn't want to give for various reasons. And so I was ready to start. We knew the winds were going to shift. I wasn't allowed to start packing, so I just started doing what I was allowed to do, and that was preparation. That mostly came in the form of photographs and label planning, which it sounds crazy to say it now, but one of the biggest things I learned from HART in 2018 was the importance of record keeping during an evac. When we're responding to wildfires, often boxes don't get labeled, which seems like a crazy thought to collection managers, but you don't have time necessarily when a fire is moving your way, to stop, look for the object number, label every box, make sure it gets put in the right place. And so I tried to come up with a faster system, rather than having our, should the collection get evacuated, rather than having people tracking down object numbers. Just a really quick way to do some record keeping to help reduce that risk of disassociation, which is really elevated during an evac. So the very first thing I did was just take pictures of everything I could, every corner of the museum, every object. The records for Indian Grinding Rock are pretty good. They're not perfect. And so I didn't want to rely on them entirely for object tracking, just in case things had to move or something wasn't quite right. And so as a backup, I just took hundreds of photographs. They were automatically saved on the cloud. So it was really comforting knowing that I had that backup system to help reduce that disassociation risk, and that during the reinstall, I not only had my written records, but these photographic records to make sure everything ended up back where it came from. I also, this took like 15 minutes and ended up being a huge help. I just drafted some quick emergency case labels so that people who were doing an evac didn't need to write the full object number on a box. They could just write the alpha code for the case. And then I would know, like, okay, this box has a letter A on it, came from case A. It's one of 8 objects that were in that case. So it's not perfect, but it made a big difference. It was way easier for packers. And it gave me, like I said, that extra comfort of knowing that there's this extra fail-safe to help prevent disassociation. So during the evac, everyone got a copy of this really quick map I made for our cases and their codes, and every case had one of these little letter tags on it. Super fast, made a huge difference. I didn't end up getting permission to start really packing the entire collection until 6 p.m. on the night of the 18th. So again, until that point, trying to prep as much as I could. I didn't have other curatorial staff, but I did have maintenance staff, and I had visitor services staff. And so I had them prepping packing materials. So building boxes, prepping working stations, and that all made a huge difference, so that all of that was ready to go once we started. When we finally did get permission to evacuate, it was 6 p.m. I had already worked almost a 10-hour day. I would end up working a 21-hour day during this entire endeavor, which I do not recommend. It was not safe. But luckily, at 9 p.m., we had our support staff from Sacramento come to help. And that included Claire Phillips, who has little stars over her. The evacuation effort took 7 hours total. We evacuated the entire museum, the entire collections room, as well as all of our important records. So it was a huge success. I have heard that we set a time record for an evac, and all of that extra prep work that I needed to do, thanks to the HEART program, was a major contributing factor in that. Not to mention the fact that we had people like Claire, who are so trained in stuff like this, who responded and helped so much. So that's a extremely quick summary of, I forgot something really important. One of the major reasons why we finally did get permission to do the evac was because of tribal involvement. So Indian Grinding Rock has really great tribal relations. We're really lucky for that. And it's because when our neighboring town finally got the evacuation warning, our tribal members who work at the park started calling our district saying, why aren't you guys evacuating the collection? And it was because of that pressure from the tribes that our district finally gave us permission. So not only was that so incredibly important as a collection manager to not only have their blessing to do the evac, but also they came and acted as tribal observers during the entire evac. So they were there watching, so that if something was being handled improperly, they could say something. Luckily, that didn't happen. Everyone has really good training. But we knew that we had their blessing. They had the comfort that we were doing everything securely. And it was it was so important to have them there. Got the whole collection out. It went to Sacramento for storage and freezing. The park was then closed for 2 weeks. We got really, really lucky at IGR that the fire did not continue in our direction that night, even though conditions did get really bad. Instead, it continued moving to the southeast. We all know it went to Tahoe. I'll get to that. For the next 2 weeks, we then focused on just park stability and structural safety. So we have all of our fire ice staged right here for structural protection. Our gates were closed and locked. And then I set up this kind of goofy instant command center for the park itself, so that any staff who was on site They had access to emergency shutoff information, emergency phone numbers, emergency lights, headlamps, radios, stuff like that. So it was that whole effort took maybe 2 hours to put together. It was really important for the next 2 weeks while we were closed. Okay, so this is the final progression map for Caldor. It moved up towards Tahoe on August 30th. That was the day that the fire reached Tahoe, and I'm sorry, August 31st. I think the fire reached Tahoe. They evacuated the city of South Lake Tahoe, and that was when we got the call to evacuate the parks in Tahoe. I'm not going to talk about that too much. It was a 3-day event, so it was a much longer evacuation. We had to, stay up in Truckee, so not immediately on site, a little bit out of the ways. But I just want to show another type of museum that sometimes we evacuate, which are these house museums. So it had like a dozen bedrooms, extremely heavy Nordic furniture. We had 24 people respond. It was a 3-day effort. And here's some more pictures of, there's Claire and I, there's me and Claire. This is obviously near the end of the evac, but we got, again, that whole thing evacuated, huge success. I am pretty much out of time, but some very quick takeaways from the IGR evac as the leader of that response. Primarily, we're all about safety and security. The most important thing is that up until now, we haven't had rangers on site when we've been doing evacs, which is wild because rangers are pretty much our only law enforcement with state parks. We rely on them really heavily. And so during an evac, you need them there for collection security. You have open museums, you have open trucks. It's a really easy opportunity for theft. Also for incident updates, people who are packing don't have time to be getting fire updates while it's going on. And so you really need that person who is connected with the actual incident command center, who's getting constant fire behavior updates in case you need to get people out of there quickly. And also for personal safety, fire evacuations, because they're on the clock and moving so quickly, are frantic environments. People are moving really quickly, carrying heavy things, and people get hurt. We had 3 bad falls this year. Luckily, we didn't have one at Indian Grinding Rock, but you need a ranger there to help provide first aid if necessary. Other major security concern is if you're worried about doing an evac, make sure you know that your collection, what the situation is like at your collection facility at night, not just during opening hours. At IGR, we worked all night until 4 in.the morning, and it got really, really dark. We had a few headlamps, but we are so lucky that we didn't lose power, which they cut power all the time in fire situations. Because if we had lost power in the middle of that evac, it would have been a horrible situation. It would have been pitch black. So know what your facilities are like at night. And lastly, it's make sure you keep really good communication with your group. I was the lead. I was so tired. I got really frantic by like midnight, 1 in.the morning. It really helped to have other people there, keep my head on straight. But I really should have had a group meeting at one point because we had different groups responding to help with the evacuation. And some of these groups didn't know each other and ended up getting suspicious of each other, even though they were all there for the right reason. Everyone who was there was supposed to be there. But because I didn't communicate that well enough, like we had curators not knowing who the tribal observers were and we're getting freaked out by them being there. So just make sure, like at some point, even if you're trying to move forward, have one group meeting, get everyone together, make sure you're all on the same page. My last thing I'll say in regards to ranger safety and ensuring the safety of your responders who are packing is that our collection staff finally complained about the lack of ranger safety during these evacs after IGR, and I'm happy to say that it is resulting in actual policy changes within state parks. So now we are reassured that any collection staff responding to an incident will have a ranger on site to help protect them and give them instant updates. And that's how it always should have been, and that's how it's going to be moving forward. So we're really happy about that. Who knows what it'll be like moving forward. We're all learning how these evacs are working in the face of ever increasing fire danger. But thanks to the HEART program, people like Claire and myself have a much better trove of knowledge and skill sets to move forward with it. So thanks very much, you guys. Looking forward to the Q&A, and that's the news from state parks.
Okay, so I would like to invite Jared and Pepper onto the virtual stage so we can discuss their work further, and that we have been getting some questions, so that's great. And then I also want to invite Corey Wegner and Lori Foley too, who can also answer any questions anyone has about our training program, about HENTEF, or the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative. All right. Oh, there we go. Hi, Pepper. Hi, Jared. Okay, we got Lori, and then we just need Corey. Okay, perfect. So first question actually for Corey and Lori, and probably myself, we actually should answer this up front. How does one participate in HEART? How does one get to take our training? And I don't know if Corey and Lori want to
Yeah, I'll
start.
say, usually in a normal year, we start the calls for applications in either late August or early September. And the training is usually held every year in December. So an application, and you need to be working in an institution where you have some responsibility for collections management or disaster planning or emergency response. And that's kind of the baseline, and then just give us an application.
One of the requisites is that you get a letter, or you present to us a letter of support from leadership, because as much as you're taught, if you don't have buy-in from senior leadership, you won't be able to go very far with implementing any activities or changes. So that's also something we want to make sure that you, your director and your colleagues also are on board.
And just one last mention for me, this is for US-based cultural heritage and emergency management. So just in the United States itself. The Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative does also dabble in training opportunities for international participants, which is a whole different topic, but HEART specifically is meant for US-based applicants. But if you're an international person wanting to learn more about our international training, please email us at culturalrescue@si.edu, and we'd be happy to talk to you about that. Okay, moving on to our next question. This is for Jared, specifically about just the people, the level of people that responded, Jared. So you said that you had 400 people respond. How did you get those 400 people? Did you or your colleagues advertise? Was it social media, word of mouth, all of the above?
It really was all of the above. The Michigan Museums Association to kind of function as our dispatch system, kind of like a fire department has a dispatch. So they sent out calls and emails to pretty much all the institutions that were within the area across the state and said, hey, they need help here. Do you have anyone you could send? And then over the course of the 4 days, we'd have a group of people come in from varying institutions to kind of come and help out. And we were able to use there's about 100 or so museum professionals to act as like our strike team leaders, our lieutenants, or whatever you call them. So that way they can kind of guide the community volunteers on how to handle the objects and to kind of supervise them. For like with the community volunteers, we got them really through word of mouth, social media, using the local news, pretty much just however we could get the word out there that's saying that, hey, these institutions need help. If you have time, if your house is okay or you're safe, when you have time, come down here and help us save your history. So, and it was really effective getting all the volunteers to come down and help out then. So there's about 100 or so people each day.
Wow.
Good balance, because following that incident command system, we were able to assign about 3 or 4 community members to each museum professional. So that way our teams were pretty well balanced and easy to manage then. So the other thing that really kind of helped out then too was several, I didn't mention this in the video and I kind of feel bad for it, but having HEART graduates then call and kind of help me out, like Lori and Corey both were on calls with me to help the institutions. And then like Elizabeth Morris and Meg Galliard, they're just amazing with helping me out. So the call out went to the HEART graduates as well. They were very helpful.
I mean, that's great. That's exactly what we want. We want the network to help each other. If I can ask a follow-up question, this isn't part of the original one, but on the volunteers. So that's wonderful that you were able to get it out through all of those different mediums. So once people arrive though, I mean, was there any sort of like assessment of their skills, or how did you kind of vet them and, you know, figure out like, okay, you go over there, you go over there, I'm going to put you on this duty. Who was in charge of that? Mhm.
We had a staging area right at the incident command post. So
Mhm.
keep track of everybody, we took one of the dry erase whiteboards and ripped it right off the wall from one of their education rooms so we could keep track of everyone. So we had the whole incident command tree right up there. As volunteers arrived into the staging area, their IT department was right on the ball. They set up a couple of QR codes so people could scan in and input their information so that we were able to track everybody. They were able to go through a process of, they had to understand, what being exposed to floodwaters could be like. And then the next one was, do you have a museum experience and what is your level of experience? So that way we could then start to separate people out. The community members that were coming in, we could just take anybody that was able to do something and then just kind of assign them to various strike teams. So, but with the museum professionals coming in, we tried to fit them to whatever their specialization might have been. So if they're a textile expert and we were able to get that information from them, then they'd become a strike team leader for the textile area, or an archivist would go to where the paper products were. So it's just having an efficient staging area, so that way you can kind of get your initial paperwork done with them and kind of give them the quick basic training, and then trying to assign them to strike teams that are going off into an area of the collection that's really kind of their specialty.
Gotcha. Thanks, Jared. All right,
I have,
Pepper.
before you go on, I have another follow-up question for Jared. So you were really fortunate that you had 100 trained, essentially, museum professionals come and assist you. Do you have any recommendations on what most probably organizations would have to do, which is they don't have access to as many professionals? So how would you approach that task?
It's really kind of figuring out like what's the local association that your museum would be part of. Like in Michigan, we have the Michigan Museums Association, and maybe it's just an assumption, but most states might have some type of a museum or a historical association. Otherwise, it might be wise if you're not part of that, start forming partnerships with museums in your area. Start sending out messages or forming a group to every museum within about 100-mile radius. So that way you can kind of form that group that says, hey, if we suffer a disaster, maybe we can help each other out and do kind of like with fire departments, they do automatic aid to help each other out. Museums could very easily adapt that type of a system to our type of emergencies and get help from each other. That way, each museum is maybe sending 1 or 2 people, and you're not draining all of your resources to help another museum out, but you're still able to help. And then when you get all of those people coming in, it turns into a pretty sizable group that can help you out. With Midland, we really only had, most museums were only sending anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 people. But when you get that many of them in all at once, that's a tremendous amount of help.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jared. All right, Pepper, now I've got a couple of questions for you. So first, right off the bat, and I was actually curious about this too. What is fire ice? You mentioned it in your presentation. What is that?
So Fire Ice is just a brand name. There are several options for similar products on the market, and it's basically a mixable gel-based fire suppressant. And it comes in a big tub that's granule. You mix it with water, put it through a pressure system, and then you can spray it to help protect structures. Like I said, there are a few different products on the market. Thermogel is another one. If it's something if it's something someone's interested in using, do your research, figure out what type of product is best for your needs. That just happens to be the one that State Parks uses most often.
Gotcha. Okay. Now a little more complicated of a question. How did your response team, Pepper, train before evacuations? The evacuations must have provided, plenty of opportunities to learn best practices. But what are the lessons that you wanted to impart on them in order to do the evacuation? Or was there any training?
So I can't speak too far back. I have only been doing evacuations for fires with state parks since the Carr fire in 2018. And it was that evac that inspired me to apply to HART in the first place. So I think we have a much larger response team than we did back then, just because fires are getting so much more frequent. And I think a lot of that training is really just happening on the job as we respond and as these get more frequent. State Parks has a lot of great internal training that happens every year. And there's a lot of great opportunities for those who are interested in becoming more focused in emergency response for collections to take basic wildland fire behavior courses, to eventually become a resource advisor, which is where you learn, if necessary, how to respond on the fire line and help redirect mitigation efforts to protect cultural and natural resources. So it's a department-wide effort, and we're learning a lot all together at the same time. And it's mostly, I'm not sure how it went before 2018.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, there, I believe someone in the audience has recommended that if in your copious free time, if you wanted to put this case study and what you guys learned and how you did it into a paper, it would be very much welcomed. So add that to, the to-do list. Speaking of reporting out, they audience members are asking a little bit more about the after action report you mentioned in your presentation. Could you elaborate a little more about that?
Sure. So when I did the first evac, or actually until I did the HART program, I didn't know anything about how the recovery process went after an evacuation. And I certainly know a lot about it now, but we had a formal after action meeting, which was great between our district leadership and myself. But the actual recovery process is ongoing, and the evacuation and the prep was this blip, whereas the recovery process is going to take months, and that's usually how it goes with evacuations. So once we reopened the park and the collections had been frozen, it's now very slowly we're getting them back and doing the reinstall process, doing condition reports to check for any damage that was accumulated during or that was accrued during the evacuation process, and then making sure that we didn't lose anything by disassociation, which so far so good.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And kind of building on that, about how long, or maybe it hasn't gotten back to this state yet, but how long did it take to put the museum back together after the evacuation? Did you have the same volunteers and staff to do the unevacuate?
A lot of that staff who responded, they work full-time at the collections facility, and they don't necessarily have the availability to come be part of the reinstall. And so it's one reason why reinstalls take so long, is you don't have the same all hands on deck process. So most of the reinstall effort is just me and my staff. So it's going pretty slowly. I think we're about half reinstalled at this point, almost 4 months later. Which is actually pretty fast. A lot of collections that get evacuated, one reason why state parks in general is a little hesitant to do these evacs is because it's knowing that not only are you putting the collections at risk, but when you're evacuating larger museums, IGR is a pretty small museum, but like Vikings Home or some of these larger institutions, it's then takes the staff at the collections facility months and months, if not a full year, to do all of their processing, all of their freezing, figuring out logistics to return those objects, and then do the reinstall process. So when you do an evac, it's not just assigning those resources for a couple days, it's knowing that everyone involved in that process is now going to have that additional work added to their existing workload for probably the next 6 months to a year.
And that's really good to identify and be aware of. The next question is actually for both Pepper and Jared. And I know us at the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative, we've been asked this too. How did you guys both handle the stress of the fire and the flood during both of your responses? Any pearls of wisdom to share?
It's like, well, for me, I'm a trained firefighter. I'm the lieutenant of Station 3 in Walker, so we train on that type of stuff. But really, the big thing is just organization. Trying to organize everything. When everything is organized and in its place and going according to plan, it's a lot less stressful. Coming up with those small, easy to manage incident action plans and objective-based goals that really kind of help control everything. That helps manage your stress quite a bit. When things start to go go south and it's chaos, that's when your stress level starts to go up, when things are going wrong. So, and just being adaptable then too, that helps out if you can just adapt to the situation. Understand that you can't control everything. You just adapt the best you can and do what you can with the resources that you have.
And I'd like to add, the HEART program was 1000% a factor as to why I was able to keep my cool at all in the situation. And a lot of that was because of the forgive me, I'm forgetting my words, but the situation that the hands-on scenario that we do as part of HEART. And when I did HEART in 2018, for some reason, I ended up as deputy IC, and I was the second disaster of the day. I did a terrible job. I was a mess. I was so stressed out, and that wasn't even a real response. And I learned so much from those few hours and from the SCRI and HENTEF staff who talked to me after about like, okay, you were a mess. This is how to do better next time. And they said that in the most polite and educational way possible. But then when this came up and I was like, oh gosh, I'm actually going to be collections IC, which would be like head of operations. But I was like, well, you learned what you learned last time. You got to do better now. And all the better ways to be organized that I learned from HEART, better situational awareness, and having that actual scenario experience of just getting some practice that was lower consequence was so invaluable and made a massive difference.
No, thanks, Pepper. And if it's any consolation, I believe Jared was actually the IC for his HEART group his year. And I believe he also was a little shaken with the responsibility as well, but he did great. He did great. So I can't believe we're at the top of the hour. So unfortunately, I think we are going to have to close out. Apologies for any questions that that we weren't able to get to today, but the communication shouldn't stop there. So our three video presenters, Jared, Pepper, and Anjali, have all graciously agreed to share their contact info. And I believe my colleague Ella is going to drop that into the chat for our audience members to grab and hopefully use wisely. All right. So again, thank you everyone for joining our program today. I want to give a round of virtual applause to our panelists and presenters. Well done, everybody. Again, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules to share your stories with us. I think it's been very beneficial. It's telling these stories is how we all learn and, you know, continue to increase our understanding of what to do in the future. I would also like to take this moment to thank the entire 2021 Virtual HEART Week coordination team with working with me and everyone else on the HENTEF and SCRI teams in getting this program together. Specifically, I want to call out and thank Ella Weiner and Sam Waltman. You both have been immensely helpful and dare I say, instrumental in navigating this process. And I thank you for all the hard work that you've done in getting not only today's event up and running, but the weeks as well. And speaking of that, the learning also does not stop here. And if I can cue our AV help to pull up the week's activities, thank you guys. So as you can see on the screen, we have daily programs beginning at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we encourage everyone who's in the room to attend and share the information of this week's activities with anybody who's interested. And this information is also available on the Cultural Rescue website and our social media pages. Everything you see on the screen is open to the public. You just have to register in Zoom. And we hope to see all of you throughout the week. So thank you, everybody, and best wishes, and hope to see you virtually throughout the next couple of days. Thank you.